this works. Oh, this sounds work. Okay, so here we go. So we are up to the new parak. Today's broadcast is sponsored by Rabbi Ephraim Nussbaum, Le'ilon Nishmas' mother, Gela Shosha Bas Moshe Zelik. And tonight is her baby in your side, and the Shoma should have an aliyah.
Amen.
So let's start the new parak. Mitzias ha'isha. If a woman finds a mitzia, you know, whenever my wife tells me, Yosy, I found a mitzia today. I saved you $500. I said, really? Can you put the $500 that you saved on the table? I'd like to see it. So mitzias ha'isha. If a woman finds a mitzia, umayse yadel, and whatever she could produce with her work, ulabayla, that belongs to her husband. V'yerushasa. So what is the definition of v'yerushasa? So Rashi tells us v'yerushasa means im nafla la yerusha. If while she was married, someone passed away, she was the next of kin, so she yarshened it. That takes on the status of nichsa maluk, where hu oichel peres b'chaya. As long as she's alive and they're married, he eats the peres. He gets the peres of the property or whatever it is. But Karen Shalom, but she keeps it. That's Rashi's first shot, which Tosfos prefers as well. Hu oichel peres b'chaya. While she's alive, he eats the peres. If she dies, he yarshens her. Boishta upagama. If she was humiliated or if she was damaged, shalah, that's hers to keep. He has no connection to it. Of course, everything that she owns, he eats the payers, but the base payment goes to her, not to him. However, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir argues, and he says, Bisman shebeseser, if the damage or the busha is beseser, which means it doesn't impact the husband as much. So then lost she gets 2/3 of those damages, veloy echad, and he only gets 1/3 of the damages. If it's something that's visible, then then he gets 2/3 of the damage, velo echad, and she only gets 1/3. Shaloi, the portion that's of the damages that are his, yinosemiyat, the mazik has to pay him right away. Vishalah, but the portion that she gets paid, once again, he gets to eat the payers of any asset that she has. So therefore, yilakach behen karka, they should buy property with the money that she got, the 2/3 of the damages that she's entitled to. But who oichel payers, and then he will be able to eat the payers of that property.
This Mandiyamar suggests that if it's Bagoli, he suffers twice as much as she does for her injury.
Correct.
That doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
So, right. So there's a lot of stuff on here. So I want to just see first Tosfos, just so we get the facts straight. What does this mean, goli and not goli? So Tosfos gives us a little bit more of the facts, and then we'll have to delve into that a little deeper. Bisman shebeseser. So Zokta, so what does a pagam shebeseser mean? It means b'makom she'ein b'nei adam yochayim liros. It means it's in a place where no one could see. He heard her in a place where you don't see. Shebegolui, what does it mean? A pagam that's golui. Shepatza b'fanel. He injured her face. B'makom shenir alakoil, where it could be seen. V'nifkam hu atzma, and because of that, the husband himself is losing because his wife's face is damaged. So if his wife's face is damaged, I'm not sure who that hurts more. Does it hurt him more because he has to live with her damaged face? As long as she doesn't look in the mirror, she'll be okay. So I'm not sure about that. Boishes, what does boishes shebeseser mean? Boishes shebeseser means shebaitzel beinoy leveino. He did something to her that was humiliating, but it was only her and him there. Shebegoli, what does it mean? A busha shebegoli is shebaitzel b'fnei kol adam. She was humiliated in public. When your wife, or if your wife is humiliated in public, by definition, you're humiliated as well. But if her humiliation is in private, then it doesn't impact you. So what's interesting to note, which I was struggling with, is it seems, and we're going to see it like this in the Gemara, that if you really think about it, she suffers, so she should be entitled to the damages, to the full damages, as if she wasn't married. if she got damaged, she should get the full brunt of whatever the damages are. In addition to this mazik having hurt her, this mazik also hurt him. And that should really be a separate cheshbon. You see clearly from the Mishnah that we always take the hezek, that's the base hezek, to the person who suffered that damage, and then we'll give some of that damages to the auxiliary claimants, as I will call them. So there's the base claimants and the auxiliary claimants. I would have thought that each of these claimants are independent claimants. He's damaging the wife independently, and he's damaging the husband independently. But from the Mishnah, you see clearly that even if there's an auxiliary claimant, he's not an independent claimant, meaning the question is only how much of her damages is he entitled to. So it's all really hinged on her, and we'll see that in the Gemara. Why we consider him a greater damage, a greater victim than she herself, like David's asking, is a good question, and I don't have clarity in why. But from Tosfos, it seems that his humiliation maybe is greater than his wife's humiliation, maybe because of his status, and the same thing, maybe he's hurt more if he has to live with someone who's very damaged versus the woman who's living with herself and her husband. It's speculation, but like David pointed out, clearly the Mishnah, at least Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir, considers his damage to be greater.
He divorces her. Does she get it? Or what
Does
happens?
she then get it? Does he have to pay her?
Because then he's no more humiliated, right? So
That's a good point. I don't know.
Art Scroll brings the Ran and the Birkas Avram.
It says,
well, it says one answer is that since her husband is responsible for protecting her, her humiliation is not as great as a single woman's would be.
aha. So in fact, so it's not like there's two sets of humiliations. Whatever part of her humiliation gets saved, whatever humiliation she's saved from, that percentage gets shifted over to him, so to speak. And what about the damage? If her face is busted up, like how could you say that it's worse for the husband than it is for her? She's the victim. So that's still a little bit difficult to understand. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Let's see the Gemara. My Kamash Malon. We have this big bombshell Mishnah telling us that the husband is entitled to all of his wives, Mashidai and Itzia. We already learned this in the last parak. Tanina, we already learned this. As follows: Ha'av zakoi b'vitad. Now we're talking about the husband, but this Mishnah starts off with Ha'av zakoi b'vitad. A father has the rights to any benefit from his daughter. B'kiddusha, he's the one who could marry her off. B'kesef, he's the one who gets to keep the kesef if whoever marries her does kiddusha kesef. B'shtar, he accepts the shtar if the husband is marrying her with the shtar ubabiyah, and he could even charge the person who he's marrying his daughter off to with biyah. Zakoi b'mitziyasa, anything his daughter finds, he gets to keep. Uvamai siyadeh, or whatever she earns. Uba forest nedareh, he is solely in control of her nidar. Mekabel is gita, if she needs a get, he's the one who's mekabel for her. But if she arsons something, the father does not eat tears of what she arsons. But nisis, once she gets married, yeser olof haba, the husband has even more rights to his wife than her father did. Shehu oichel perish b'chayah, he will even eat the pears of her assets while they're living together. So basically, this mission that we already learned in the last parak says quite clearly that whatever's on the list that the schusim and the daughter that goes to the father automatically is to the husband as well, and then some. So why do I need our Mishnah here to repeat those items that a husband has as schus in his wife if it's quite clear to us already from a Mishnah in the earlier parak? And for the Gemara, there's two items that are new in this Mishnah that we didn't learn yet in the last parak, and that is boishto pagama estrichalei plukto the Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir v'Rabbanan. This machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir and the Rabbanan, if the husband is entitled to any of her damages from gusha or from pagam, though that's a new thing that we haven't learned before. So since it's discussing that, so Agav that, the Mishnah starts with all of the rights that the husband has in his wife. Zok Tehele Gemara Vayt. Tani Tana Kameda Rava. Someone presented a brisa to Rava, and we're going to see Rava did not like it at all. And what was the brisa that someone quoted in front of Rava? Mitzia Isha La'atzma. If a woman finds a mitzia, it belongs to her, which of course disputes our Mishnah. Rabbi Kiva Omer Levaila. So basically, someone quoted a brisa to Rava that tells us that our Mishnah is not a unanimous halacha. Our Mishnah is consistent with Rabbi Kiva, but there happens to be a Tanakama who argues on our Mishnah and says that a woman gets to keep her own mitzias. Omer Le. So Rava said, I think you're making a big mistake. It's impossible for me to accept that Rabbi Kiva holds that a husband has the right to his wife's mitzvah. I'm going to prove to you that Rabbi Kiva holds that a woman has the right to keep her own mitzvah. Omer Le, hashta, umahadofa, the ma'asiyodeh. When she earns more than what a typical woman could earn, what is the halacha according to Rabbi Kiva? I'm going to just turn over the blot to today's blot. The ma'asiyodeh, Rashi says, the ma'asiyodeh is shayach l'meimar sheyehei shaloi. Really, there would be a good argument to say that the husband should have the rights to her hadofa, to extra earnings that she makes when she puts in extra effort. Why would there be a logical argument to say that she should be able to keep, that he should be able to keep her ma'asiyodayim? Because the ma'asiyodah tachas mezainos. We know that why does a husband get ma'asiyodayim? Because he gives his wife mezainos, he supports her. Or he gives the extra mal, like we learned. But regardless, he has a claim to them. So if even ma'asiyodayim, which the husband has a claim to, Amar Rabbi Kiva la'atzma, Rabbi Kiva says that she keeps her extra ma'asiyodayim, as we'll soon see. Mitziyah, like her mitziyah, which she has less of a claim on, surely she should be able to keep. So how could you, Rava asks, how could you say that Rabbi Kiva holds that the husband keeps her mitziyah if he doesn't even keep her hadafas ma'asiyodayim, which he has a much greater claim to? Because that's connected to mezainos. Surely he shouldn't get to keep her mitzvahs, which he has no specific claim over. So therefore, and how do I know? How do I know that Rabbi Kiva holds the hadafas ma'asiyodayim, she gets to keep? That's not, we learned a Mishnah. Koinim shani oisel. We learned this as well. She makes a nether, whatever I produce should be usher to you. So she's prohibiting her husband Avano from anything that she produces. The Tanakama says, it's a completely invalid nether. The husband doesn't even have to be made for it. You know why? Rashi says, the mishabdele, because whatever is hers belongs to him. All of her ma'asiyodayim belong to him. So it's not hers to make a nether on. So he doesn't even have to be made for it. The nether has no validity. Sure, her ma'asiyodayim belong to him, and her nether has no validity. But maybe she'll earn extra, and maybe she has control over that. Zok the Tanakama, the ime adafa, if she produces more than typical, nami levahu, that also belongs to the husband. So therefore, there's no reason for him to be made for the nether. It has no validity. But Rabbi Kiva said, Rabbi Kiva meyofer, you have to be made for the nether. Shema tadif alav yoser min arayuloi. If she produces more than what's typical, that will belong to her, and the nether will be chal. So just in case she's going to produce extra, make sure to be made for the nether. But what do you see clearly from here? That Rabbi Kiva holds that she has the right to keep extra work that she does. So madich, extra work that she does, where he might have a claim to, because he is giving her mezainos, her mitzios, surely she should be able to keep. So Zok Rava, how could you quote a brisa that says Rabbi Kiva holds he gets to keep it? Surely he shouldn't get to keep it. So to take a step back, so our Mishnah that said that mitziyas alabayla would be inconsistent with Rabbi Kiva, because Rabbi Kiva would clearly hold that she gets to keep her own mitziyah. And therefore, Zok Rava, you were making a mistake. You quoted this brisa wrong. Elo epoch. It's exactly the opposite. Mitzia the Isha Labaila is Rabbi Akiva, which disputes our Mishnah. I'm sorry, Mitzia the Isha Labaila, period, comma, and Rabbi Akiva Imer La'atzma, which disputes our Mishnah. So the Tanakama holds Labaila, and Rabbi Akiva holds it La'atzma, as per Rava's argument. And therefore, Rabbi Akiva will not be consistent with our Mishnah. And that's how Rava remains. Frek the Gemara Akasha. V'haki also Ravin Omer Rabbi Yochanan. When Ravin came, he said over in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that if she earns extra money, but it's extra money that's not causing her to work too much extra, how is it possible for her to make a lot more money than just the 5 shloim of spun wool without her doing extra exertion? Rashi tells us, because she's not a spinster, she's a lawyer. She's an urban woman. She's a lawyer, she's a doctor, she has a good profession, she's earning a lot of money. So there she's not exerting any more effort, but in her normal workday, she's bringing in so much more money. So Rabin said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, if she's earning a lot more because she's more skilled, because she's more capable, kula alma loy pligi the baal have it. There, even Rabbi Yochanan agrees that belongs to the husband, because that falls within the normal salary or normal exertion that her husband's entitled to. Keep pligi, where will Rabbi Akiva say that it's la'atzma, that she gets to keep it? Which means shedach ka'atzma v'adifa. You know, there's a very famous story about a Malamed who said, if I would be rich like Rothschild, I would be even richer than Rothschild. You know why? Because I would also tutor on the side. So that's exactly what this woman was. She even though she's a doctor and a lawyer, but she sells on Amazon on the side. So she might be a constitutional lawyer who fights at the Supreme Court, but on the side she sells on Amazon. So she's making extra money over and above. And it's that money that we have a machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim about. If she happens to earn a lot of extra money in her normal course of work, where she's doing an extra job. The Tanakama holds this would belong to her husband. Rabbi Akiva holds she gets to keep that. So what's shver? What shver is, Rashi has to insert a note, which Tosfos doesn't like, but Rashi has to insert a note to tell us what shver. Zokt Rashi, the kasol kadaita. So I am on the skinny lines in Rashi, the 4th line down. The kasol kadaita that mitziasa kehadafa shaloi alidei atchaki. Finding a mitzia should be like a woman who earns extra money without an extra effort. So therefore, how could you tell me that Rabbi Akiva holds that a mitzia she gets to keep if Rashi says we assume that a mitzia is like hadafa shaloi alidei atchak, and everybody agrees by hadafa shaloi alidei atchak that it belongs to the husband. So Zokra Papa, your assumption is wrong. Amra Papa, Mitziasa is kadafa shal yidei atchak dami. A mitzia isn't comparable to extra work to extra money that's earned during the normal course of her work. A mitzia is comparable to extra money that she has that's due to extra work over and above her normal day's work. And in such a case, as we know, plukta the Rabbi Akiva Rabbanan, where Rabbi Akiva holds she gets to keep it, and the Rabbanan hold he gets to keep it. So we've been talking here about a woman who's obviously multitasking. She's not only a doctor or surgeon by day, but she does Amazon at night. So we know women are a lot more capable than just doing 2 things at a time. They can do many more than 2 things. But what you see here from the Gemara is that a mitzia is considered hadafa that's al yidei atchak, and it's not within the scope of what is awarded to the husband. When Chazal gave the husband her ma'aseh yadayim, a mitzia is like hadafa shal yidei atchak. It's out of that domain. So the question is, how about Dr. Papa? Boyer Papa also shtayim bebasach. What if she has 2 jobs? So do you say the second job is out of the scope of what the husband owns, or similar to mitzia, Or maybe you say since they're both regular jobs and she can juggle those two jobs, so maybe that is within the domain of the husband. By Ravina, even something more extreme. What if she's able to juggle 3 or 4 jobs at the same time, which is way above normal? Ma'u, is that still considered part of what Chazal granted the husband, that he gets from Ma'ashidayim? On that, the Gemara answers taken. I heard an interview on CFRB. They're talking now a lot about whether or not workplaces are going to force people to come into the office and work, because people really like working remotely. So there was a fellow who called in from Costa Rica, and he said, I don't work here. I'm on vacation here in Costa Rica, but my wife works for the Canadian government, and she has 2 separate full-time jobs that are 9 to 5 that she works online. And in each of these 2 9-to-5 jobs, she's making $90,000. So she's earning $180,000 a year doing 2 full-time jobs. One job, the work hours are from 8 to 2, and the other work hours are from 9 to 5. He says she's doing both jobs simultaneously. She's being rewarded and then recognized for doing her job super well, and she's doing 2 jobs. It just goes to show what the expectations are of federal employees that are union employees. You can only imagine. So she's very happy doing 2 jobs at the same time. So if you have any employees that are working remotely, maybe see how many other jobs they're holding down while they're working for you at the same time. So here you have a woman who's doing multiple jobs. Now, if I would tell him that Ravina had a shaila about a woman who does 4 jobs, this guy would kill himself because he'd be depressed. He was so excited his wife has 2 jobs, but from the Gemara you see she could do 4 jobs. She could be making so much more money. So let's imagine what it means for a woman to multitask. So let's just look at Rashi, what Shtayim Sholoch V'Arbam Vazakas. So Rashi gives us a list of multiple things. Shemeres Kishuyim, she is a watcher of gourds, so she's watching gourds in the field. Vitava Pishton, while she's doing that, she's spinning flax. And while she's doing that, Umalamed Shir Lenashim V'Schar, and she's also giving music lessons. So she's doing these 3 things simultaneously. She's spinning, she's watching, and she's giving music lessons. And while she's doing all that, she's incubating eggs in her lap. Or maybe either eggs, or chicken eggs, so she wants to hatch these chickens, or maybe she's incubating the eggs of worms, that are silkworms, that make silk. And women warm those in their laps, and that's how they hatch. So the only thing missing is if she had a smartphone, she can also be selling on Amazon on the side. So you see how women multitask. Okay, so before we go back there, we just have one little problem. We have a machlokes about mitzia, and the machlokes is it considered like ha'adafa shal yidei tzchak, or is it like ha'adafa shal lo yidei tzchak? Is finding a mitzia extra work over and above her normal day's work, or is included? So what is that shaila? So let's see Rashi and let's get some information on it. Shelo yidei tzchak. So our Papa says mitziyot ha'adafa shal yidei tzchak. Why is that? Zok Rashi, because right mitzias, you don't just walk down the street and find a bar of gold. That doesn't happen. How do you find a mitzvah? You have to work for it. In order to even find the mitzvah, it also involves some work. She's walking along the shoreline and she sees a fish that fisherman caught it and didn't take it away. It's left over there. So she asked it to pick it up. I don't know about your wife, but my wife is not picking up a dead fish that's lying at the side of the ocean. But that's something that she could do. But it takes some work. She got to cut that fish. It's not like it's easy. Or it's or if she finds an injured deer that she could take home and check. Or lechapis tima bekarka, to find something that's like walking along the beach with a metal detector to find a buried gold bracelet. She'll find the gold bracelet, and her husband will say, "I need it. You have to give it to me." So she'll say, "What in the world do you need it for?" So he says, "You think you're the only one I give gold bracelets to?" And then she'll hit him over the head. So you see that there are mitzvahs that involve a lot of work, but there's also mitzvahs that don't involve a lot of work. So the question here is, what is this machlokes? If the mitzvah is alidei chak or lo, it's a mitzvah. Some are the mitzvahs you have to work hard to find, and some you're lucky you just find. So what is it? So what I saw in the Mefarshim, and what I mean when I say Mefarshim, I just mean the notes at the bottom of the Masifta Gemara, but Mefarshim sounds better when I say it. I saw in the Mefarshim that everybody agrees. You can't argue the Metzias. Some Metzias come easy, some don't. The question is as follows. Do you say, since most Metzias you have to work hard for, so therefore the Rabbanan said that the husband should not be entitled to it. And once they said that, it's a loy plug, it's across the board. Since many Metzias you have to work hard for it, they said the whole category of Metzias don't go to the husband, it stays at the wife. And the other Shidol, no, since there are some Metzias that come easy, therefore we give the whole category of Metzias to the husband, even though there are some that have to be worked hard to get. That takes us to the end of this sugya. Boisha upagam. The Mishnah says that her busha and pagam, we have a machlokes if she gets to keep it, or I think it was Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira who said that he gets a big share of it. Frek the Gemara Kash. Maskav lo Rabba bar Rav Chan. Frek the Rabba bar Rav Chan. El me'ata. Bayish to sasa shal chaverei. Hakanami. The boy l'meitin le'boyches. Are you telling me that a husband is entitled to damages because his wife was hurt? Well, if that's the case, if someone was mivaza my horse, I hope everybody's volume is kept low. If someone's mivaza a horse, are you going to say that he's entitled to it? Why should he be entitled to something bizarre that his wife had? Dr. Moore, that's not a kasha. That's not a kasha. Visus, bar boy shasu. A sus, there's no bush at all, even if it's sus. No matter what happens to his sus doesn't have busha, and he doesn't have busha. So that's not a good question to ask. Ella, rokak bevigdoi shel chaveira. If someone spat on his friend's beged, hakanami. So there the beged got spat on, not the person. Hakanami, the boy mason leboishes. Are you going to say that if someone spits on your beged, he has to pay you for boishes because he embarrassed your beged? And if you want to argue that, of course, if someone spits on my beged, he has to pay me because you embarrassed my beged. So I just want to highlight something that I sort of hinted to in the Mishnah, and that is as follows. There's no such thing, again, as an auxiliary claimant. In other words, unless the actual damage, the horse that got spat on, the clothing that got spat on, unless that has an independent claim of damages, of busha, then there's no claim for an auxiliary claimant. An auxiliary claimant could never claim I had busha because you damaged, you embarrassed something else. If the thing that you embarrassed is entitled to payment, then the auxiliary claimant can take a part of it. But never is an auxiliary claimant entitled to anything on his own. So the ragag b'bigla shel kaveiroi, a beged is not a claimant. So hakanami the boy and making leboishes, and we're comparing a wife to a beged. Of course, there's no reason why I should get if the beged of my wife was humiliated. Zok to Gemara, hakanami the boy and making leboishes v'chitema hakanami. And if you want to say sure, buy a beged as well. If someone spits on my beged, I'm entitled to a claim of boishes. But that's not true because vatnan roka someone spit at you and then hit you in the face, it hit you on your body. That's when there's a payment of boishes. Or upaya roisha isha, someone pulls a woman's tichel off in public. Or vehever talisa mimenu, or someone pulls off your clothing in public. Very embarrassing. Any one of these actions mandate that the person who did this has to pay the victim 400 zuz. And the Amar Rav Papa, and Rav Papa said over there, Lo shanu elaboy. He only has to pay 400 zuz if his saliva actually landed on the person. Aval bevigdoi, if the saliva only landed on his beged, potter, it'll be potter. So oibezoi, why is it that a man is entitled to boishes? If his wife was humiliated, he's not entitled to boishes. If his beged was humiliated, Dr. Gemara, what's the comparison? Bevigdoi less lazy lusa. The beged doesn't have humiliation. It's a beged. It's an inanimate object. Ishtoi is lusa. So there's a base claim. When there's a base claim because she is suffering damages, yes, it's logical to say that the husband should be entitled to part of those claims. But a beged, there's no base claim. So of course, there's no justification to him getting a payout.
Evidently, nobody ever spit on his suit.
I hear it. So Ravina Akabashi, well, let me find you another case where there is a base claimant and you still don't award any money to the auxiliary claimant. Imagine you have a poor guy, and he's part of a larger family who's very wealthy and very powerful and very successful, and someone spit this only in the face in public. Of course, he is the main claimant, but the entire family is humiliated when a member of their family is humiliated in public. So Hakanami, the boy Lemaitin, the boy the whole B'nai Mishpacha, are you going to say that the whole B'nai Mishpacha also has a claim to that boishus? Amalei, he answered, no. Hasam lav gufayu. Your relative isn't your goof. Well, hacha ishtay gufay boy. It's ishtay gufay. When someone's spitting on your wife, it's like it's spitting on you because a person and his wife is one person. It's ishtay gufay. That's when he is an auxiliary claimant to her busha. But Sama family, he has no right to her busha. And Shmuel added, look at this guy. Why he need only been told? If everybody in his family is rich, they should have made him rich too. He shouldn't be an only. And Nachman, now that he was humiliated, they want to take away his award as well. Shmuel wasn't happy with this family at all. But so that's shot in the Gemara that you have to have a base claimant, the person who actually suffered that damage, and the only time there'll be an auxiliary claimant if it's kugufai, which means the only time you can have an auxiliary claimant if the auxiliary claimant is her husband. Okay, Gavalta. Now we're up to the tough negotiations that the chassan and the kala, the chassan's father and the kala's father negotiate to have each person contribute properly to the wedding and to the support. The Zokta Heilige Mishnah. Before we do the Mishnah, I just want to announce again that tonight's broadcast is Le'il Nishmis of Ephraim's mother, Ephraim Nishma's mother, Gela Shosha Bas Moshe Zelig, whose baby on Yorshah tonight, in the Shama Sharav and Aliyah. So Zokta Heilige Mishnah. Hapoitik Mois Lachasnoi. Someone told his son, they made up with his son-in-law, I'm gonna give not. So during the Eresin, they shmooze exactly what's gonna be. Come to the Suin, it's gonna be the Ksuba. I'm gonna give you $1 million for your Ksuba money. Umeis Chasnai, and now his son-in-law dies. So his daughter is Zokok Liyibum to his son-in-law's brother. Amru Chachamim, the Chachamim said, Yochalu sheyomer la'achicha, Yochalu sheyomer, the father-in-law could say, La'achicha ha'yisi writes elite. I wanted to give your brother who died, him I wanted to give $1 million. Loch, but to you, I'm not going to give you a penny. And there's nothing the guy can do. So you might think, since I'm taking over my brother's marriage, I'm entitled to all of the benefits as well. The Chacham said, no, the father-in-law could say, I don't want to give you money. So let's have a look at this. What would the brother himself have done? The brother who passed away, had he been alive and his father-in-law said, I'm not giving it to you, what is his recourse? The Rashi tells us that Abul Achiv, if the brother was alive and it was promised that it's going to go into the Ksuba $1 million, and then the guy's not coming up with the money, what the brother can say is, oh, Yitain, either give me the money that you committed to before I do the Nisuin, or I'm just going to wait, I'm not going to do the Nisuin, and your daughter is going to wait there until she has white hair, and I'm not going to move. So he sort of has the father-in-law in a very tough spot because his daughter will be locked up. She's an Arusa now. She can't marry anybody else, and she'll be stuck. So that's how he could exert pressure to make his future father-in-law come up with the funds. However, if he dies and it's his brother, then they could demand of the brother, you must free this woman. Either give her chalitza or do yibum, but you're not allowed to hold her hostage. But the brother was able to hold her hostage. Zog to Heilige Mishnah Beit. What happens if it's paska lahachnis loy elav dinar? The father-in-law says it's going to go into ksuba. I'm giving you 1,000 dinar for your number. The halacha is he doesn't just walk away with that money. He now has to add to his ksuba 1.5 times. So for every dollar his shver gives it in nadin, he has to add to his ksuba $1.50 in ksuba money, so that if his marriage breaks up or if he dies, his wife will get 1.5 times whatever she brought in. And this only applies if she brought in this in cash. So Pascal happens like Elov dinner, who points a connected Kamesh Esrei Monah. So for every dollar his father-in-law gives him Nadan, he has to add to the Ksuba. So besides the Monah or Messiah of a regular woman, and besides the Toifus Ksuba that everyone gives, above all that, he has to give her back in her Ksuba 1.5 times whatever he gets in cash.
Where did
The
they
Gemara
get
is
that?
going to, I'm sorry?
Where did they get the 1.5? Why does he have to do that?
So the Gemara is going to tell us on Ahmed Bays, the reason for this is because they're giving him money that he's able to invest. He has cash. He can invest it and do very, very well. Rashi says it here as well. Look at Rashi. He's expected to invest that money and make a lot of money out of it. And therefore, she's entitled to that. Should he die or should he divorce her, she should be entitled to at least a big percentage of the profits that he should be able to make with the money that he's given.
50% profit over, I don't know how many years, but that sounds like a very unreasonable amount.
Well, he could be married for 20 years and then he divorces her.
Oh,
So that's not so bad.
no.
And what about the-
1 year? What about
But you're
1
going to
year?
soon find out that by the time he has to pay all the fees that they put upon him, it's not worth taking it out. You're going to soon see. It's going to cost him way more than the not.
Mhm.
But this is
that's-
just, I see the mission breaking it to us slowly because we would freak out if we would see what other expenses are going to get tacked on to what he has to pay her for that nadan.
Yossi, but
Yes.
and he's being forced to do it because he has to give a chalitza or not. Either yavam or chalitza.
No,
This
we're
is a
talking
yavam.
about, we're not talking about such a case. We're talking about a regular case where they're getting married and the shver is giving nadan. So whatever the shver gives a nadan, he has to write in his ksuba back to her 1.5 times. This is not speaking about someone who died. This is speaking about a chassan who's getting married. So he has to write in his ksuba how much he's going to give her when he dies or if he divorces her. So he has to give 1.5 times a nadan.
This is a takana? What is this exactly? It sounds very arbitrary.
Well, I would assume it's all based on a theory, a strategy that we learned in last pair, that in order to induce a father-in-law to want to give nadan, he wants to see some return, right? He wants to know that his item is still in also. So I'm putting in this money. Hopefully you'll do a lot with it, but I expect that my daughter is going to benefit from it.
Well,
Aber
that's
der
just
Eidem hat doch nicht Geld.
yeah.
What?
Der Eidem hat doch nicht Geld.
No, he's not giving money now. It's just going into the ksuba. So over the years, it's expected that he'll make a lot of money with this seed capital that he had. And if he dies, the father-in-law wants his daughter to get that money.
Well, not all investments works out so well. So I don't know what.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out so well, and there's not enough money for her to get the ksuba, too bad for her, right? The whole purpose, she cannot collect the ksuba if there's no money to collect from. But if there's money in the estate, at least she'll be entitled to it. So it's not like he's going to, if he dies or if he divorces her, if he doesn't have the money, he doesn't have the money. But whatever money is available, she has the right. And if there is a lot of money available, then she'll get it. So I mean, again, if he divorces her, he probably has to come up with the money. He probably owes it. But if he dies, then it's only what's available in the estate. And the main point is, if the money will be there, at least she'll get it.
So he can hold her for niguna and not give her that get.
Well, that's always a risk in the Chanam. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. So this is if the shver gives him cash. What if the shver doesn't give him cash? The shver gives him assets. He says, I'm giving you a car and I'm giving you clothing and it's worth $10,000. And the item is rolling his eyes. You had $10,000. I couldn't unload it in the flea market for anywhere close to $10,000. So what happens if it's uchaneged ashum? What if his father doesn't give him cash? His father will give him assets, which they claim, and of course, when they are going to be bringing it to give over to the chatan with big pomp and fanfare, they're going to inflate its value. So automatically, when he writes what he's giving back, who poised pachis chaimish. So if it's cash, he has to give 1.5. If you give any asset, then it's not 1.5. It's not even 1-to-1. It's 0.8, which means whatever they inflate its value when they're assessing it to make it look good at the time of the marriage, he only has to write in the ksuba 80%. So if they give him what they claim is $10,000 worth of goods, then he'll write in the ksuba back to her $8,000. So once again, so not only is it not 1.5, it's not even 1, it's only 0.8. Now this halacha, the Mishnah is going to repeat this another 3 times. So in total, we're going to learn the same halacha in the next 5 lines, an additional 3 times, for a total of 4 times. But before we mention the additional 3 times, we're going to take a slight detour. And that is, Shum b'mana, Vishav b'mana. What happens if they didn't inflate the value and they actually came with a proper appraisal that was done prior, not during the marriage ceremony where everything gets inflated, but it's legit? Well, then ein lo elamah. Then it's dollar for dollar. So if it's a proper appraisal that was not inflated to make it look good by the chasna, then all he has to do is write in the ksuba that he's going to give her, in the event that the marriage ends, the same value. Okay, so now let's get back to the inflated ones. So we already said once that when he gets assets from her, then he only has to oblige himself to 80% of what the inflated value is. Shum b'mana, what happens if they did the inflated value of a money? So what he did is he wrote, so there's 2 ways for this to occur. Either she'll bring the assets in, they'll assess them, and then as a response to that, he'll write how much he's going to give her back in the ksuba. But sometimes he could write in the ksuba how much he's giving based on the assets that he's expecting to get. So what happens if Shum b'mana, he wrote in the ksuba, I'm going to give you a money, so then she has to give him 20% more than that money. What is a money? A money is 100. A money is 100 dinar. 100 dinar. A seller is 4 dinar. So if a seller is 4 dinar, so he wrote in the ksuba 100 dinar. And if 100 dinar is supposed to be 80% of what the assets that he received, well then 100 is 80% of 125. So therefore, if he wrote in the ksuba mana, they have to give him inflated assets worth 125 dinar. So how do you get 125 dinar? Because every selah is 4 dinar. So 31 selah, 31 times 4 is 124. And vidinner and 1 extra dinner. So therefore, he's giving him a total of 125 dinar. So he wrote in the star, I'm going to give you a mana, and then they gave him assets overinflated worth 125. The perfect ratio. So that's the second time we learned the same halacha, that he's mechayiv himself only 80% of the assets that he received. And then another time, if he writes 400 in his tuba, then they have to give him assets of 500 again, because they're inflated assets. And so that's 3 times we've just repeated the same halacha. And the 4th time, ma. Let me just turn over the daf. Ma. Shechosin paisik, whatever they bring in to the chosin, who paisik pachas chaimish, he only has to oblige himself to give 20% less. Did you get it? After 4 times, did we all chap? By the time we learned it 4 times, we should chap. But usually the Mishnah is written to somebody who could chap at the first time. And the Gemara is going to want to know why the Mishnah was repeating the same halacha over and over and over again. So first of all, Taner Rabban, this halacha that the father-in-law can tell the Yavim, your brother who died, I was going to give him the $1 million, but I have no intention of giving you the $1 million. Dr. Braisa, Taner Rabban, Ein Tarach Leimer Rishon Talmud Chacham B'Sheni Amoretz. It's pashut that if the person who died was a Talmud Chacham, and that's why I gave him the $1 million. And the second, the brother who's doing Yibam is in Amoretz, there it's pashut in the svara. The father doesn't want to oblige himself to give this guy $1 million. Even the first person who was an Amaretz, and he was still willing to give him $1 million. And the second one is a Talmid Chacham, it's even a better shidduch. So it's logical that he should even more want to give $1 million. Still, I only wanted to give the nod to your brother. The father has the right to say, I don't want to give you. He doesn't have to give the Yovim what he would give the husband. Why are you repeating the same halacha 4 times? And for the Gemara, there's a whole bunch of different perspectives that we need to cover, and this is why the Mishnah repeats the halacha 4 times. A, there's a very big difference between if somebody is giving a massive natan of $1 million versus if someone's giving a small natan of $100. And you might say, when does he get to reduce it by 20%? When he's getting a little bit of a little bit. But if his father is giving him so much money, where reducing it by 20% is a massive loss, maybe then you don't let him do that. On the flip side, if the Mishnah only told us that when there's a massive amount, he can reduce by 20%, that's because it's very significant. But something that's so insignificant, maybe he shouldn't be able to reduce. So that's why you need 2 of the cases to tell us, say, if it's a significant amount, and say if it's not a significant. Then the other 2 cases are needed to teach us that this transaction, as we discussed, could have occurred 2 separate ways. One way it could occur is the father comes with all his assets, with his whole Kijiji account that he's trying to blow off all of his assets, his leftover scarf and his spare tires on rims and the winter tires from last year. He can take all those assets, pile them in, bring him to the son-in-law, and then the son-in-law will write back a 20% reduction. That's one way it could occur. The other way it could occur is first the son-in-law writes, I'm going to put $100 into my ksuba, and then the father-in-law has to bring assets worth $120. So to cover all those 4 options, say if she's starting it, if she's initiating it, or if he's initiating it, if it's a lot of money or if it's a little money, the Mishnah repeated this 4 times to cover all those cases. So now let's see this inside. Hainu Reisha, Dr. Gemara, Tana Shuma Rabba, Vikatani Shuma Zuta. The Mishnah wanted an example of a large amount of money and a small amount of money. Tana Shuma Day, the Mishnah wanted to have a case where he initiated it, and he's putting in a small amount, and therefore she's going to give a little bit more than that. And Vikatani Shuma Dida, and we also have a case where she's the one who's doing the assessment. Okay, now we're into another very, very interesting subject. They made up that she was going to give cash. So we already learned in the last Mishnah that if she gives cash, he has to write back into the ksuba. For every $1 she gives, he's got to give back in the ksuba $1.50. And then once again, the Mishnah repeats the same halacha. Salah, every seller that she brings in, which is 4 dinarim, nasa shisha dinarim, will end up coming back there in the ksuba at 6 dinarim, which is that ratio 1 to 1.5. The Gemara is going to ask, we just learned this in the last Mishnah, why is the Mishnah repeating this all over again? Now here's where we see it's really not worth getting any natan at all. Because sometimes when you make a donation, they say if you give $100, then you'll get a free gift, right? A lot of moishas have that. You give $100, you get a free gift. $1,000, you get a free becher. So when the son-in-law gets nadan, mikabel alav asara dinarim lekupa lechol mana umana. So right off the bat, as soon as he gets that nadan, he has to give her 10% back for kupa, which the Gemara will tell us is for perfume. So right off the bat, before he gets the money, he has to immediately give back 10% in perfume, and he still has to write 1.5 times in the ksuba. So this deal of not getting from Shver is not looking so good, and in the Gemara we're going to see it's even worse than that. So anyway, immediately he has to give her right away perfume that's 10% of the value of what he received from them. It all depends on the minig. It's not specifically 10%. Zog to Gemara. Hainu poisek kenegdom chamisha asher mana. the case of our Mishnah, that for every seller you give back 60 norim in Ksuba, well, isn't that identical to what we just learned in the last Mishnah? That if there's 1,000 mana, then he has to give back Kamisha Asama, 10 mana, he has to give back 15 mana, which we already said in the last Mishnah. So Gemara, no, Tana is Keraba, but Tana is Kazuta. It's important to tell us this halacha when there's a large amount of money involved, and it's important to tell us this halacha when there's a small amount of money involved. Utricha, the Tana is Keraba, if it was only talking about a big amount of money, the Navish Ravcha. On a big amount of money, there's a lot of opportunity for great profit. And that's why you have to give back 1.5. Well, it's Kazuta, yeah, even though I might have a 50% profit, but 50% of $20 is nothing. The Zuta Ravcha, Amaloi, maybe I don't have to give you back so much money in Ksuba. Tricha, that's why you need the case of Iskazuta. The Ashmini Iskazuta, and if we only knew that the Iskazuta, a small amount of money, gets back 1.5, that's the Zuta Ziyuna, because it's much easier to invest $100 than it is to invest $1 million. You need to do much more due diligence. The risk is much higher. So maybe since I have to work so much harder to invest a larger amount of money, I wouldn't have to give back 1.5. Okay, now we're at a little bit of a sad Gemara. My kupa, what is this 10% that he has to give her back for kupa? Omar Bashi, kupa shel b'samim. It means kupa shel b'samim. He has to buy her b'samim. Rashi says, what does this mean? Rashi says, I'm sorry, Rashi does not say. It means he has to give her b'samim. He has to give her b'samim. Maybe Rashi says. I know Rashi says somewhere. Rashi says over here. He can buy her b'samim. Okay, but we don't yet know. Is this a one-shot deal? He buys her b'samim for a wedding. Does he have to buy her recurring? We're not sure yet. Now we're going to figure that out now. This only applies in Yerushalayim, which Rashi says in Yerushalayim. In Yerushalayim, they wore perfume, so that's why this is relevant in Yerushalayim, but not in other places. Tosfos actually challenges it, and Tosfos says they didn't wear perfume in Yerushalayim. Tosfos says, a woman never had to put on perfume in Yerushalayim. If they read Haktaris, because there was such a beautiful smell in the air, no one needed to wear perfume. So therefore, Tosfos says, this that he gave her this perfume was not for the smell. What are these besamim? What do these spices and herbs do for her? It softened her skin. It removed the hair. And it straightened out her wrinkles. So that's what this was about. But whatever the case is, he's got to give her back 10%. Now we need to know what's the deal. Now, first of all, we know that in all of these transactions, if the girl is bringing in $100 worth of assets, he only is writing her back in Ksuba $80 because we discounted by 20%. So when we say that he's got to give 10% back on the spot in Besamim, is that 10% of what he's writing in his Ksuba, which is a lesser amount, or is it 10% of the inflated amount? That's Shiloh number one. If you're going to say 10% of the amount that he wrote in the Ksuba, which is the lesser amount, is it Yom Rishon or call Yom V'Yom? Does he only have to give her these Besamim for the first day of their wedding, or does he have to give her every day 10%? You see how it's adding up? After 10 days, he has nothing left. And if you're going to say you need to give her every day 10% of the original Natan and Besamim, Shabbos Rishona, I call Shabbos for Shabbos. Is it only the first week of Sheva Brachas? Or maybe every week he's got to give her every day Besamim, that's 10%. Intin Zalaimer call Shabbos for Shabbos. And if it means every week, Chodesh Rishon, I call Chodesh for Chodesh. Is it only the first month of his marriage or every month? Intin Zalaimer call Chodesh for Chodesh. And if you're going to say every month, is it Shana Rishon is only for the first year? I call Shana B'Shana. So Gemara Teku. So if you figure this out, in 10 days, he's already given back everything that he got. And if this goes on and on, this is a very, very bad deal. So talking about the summum, I don't like the smell of this at all. I would say, you know what, Shver, keep your knot because it's only going to cost me. And now we're getting into some serious stories. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Ma'isa bebita shel Nachtiman ben Gurion. There was a story with the daughter of Nachtiman ben Gurion. Nachtiman ben Gurion, we learned about his daughter-in-law last week. He was one of the wealthiest people in Yerushalayim, and his
Ben
daughter-in-law
Gurion.
wanted. I'm sorry.
As much as he mit Ben Gurion is shiny git.
And she wanted them to give her an allotment of wine. And it said they gave her a lot of wine. They gave her a whole bunch of wine per week to cook with. And she said, I wish on your daughter so much wine, because she was upset. She felt that she wasn't getting enough. That was one shot. And the other shot was she was thankful that she was getting enough. So here is a similar story. The daughter of Nachim ben Gurion, Tosfos says the case is where her husband was alive. And the question was, based on the Nadan, how much Bisumim is she supposed to get? It says, Akoy Lefi, what does it say? Akoy Lefi Aminik. Akoy Lefi Minik Amadina. So she was a very, very wealthy girl. And the Chacham told her husband that what does he have to give her? What does he have to give her in Bisumim? Arba Me'et Zehuvim, which is a fortune of money they allotted to her for her Bisumim. L'boy b'yom, just for that one day. Omer lahem, she told him back, Kach tivs to go live noitzaycha. This is what your daughter should get, because she was being ungrateful. Or maybe she was thankful to them. And in this case, ba'anu acharei amen, they answered amen. Now, if you remember last week, when it was a question of how much wine she was going to be allotted, they didn't answer amen. And in this case, they answered amen. The Rashi tells us, last week she didn't answer amen because the case was that she died, that her husband died, and she was falling to evil. And the question is until the evil, how much wine she would get. So they didn't say amen because they don't want their daughters, Rachman al-Islam, to lose their husbands. But in this case of Tosfos, Rashi doesn't learn this way, but Tosfos says in this case, her husband was alive. And it's just a question of how much Bisumim she's going to get from him. So there they said amen, because that's a wonderful thing that the husband should be able to give the wife Bisumim, and there's no tragedy involved. And now we're going to be learning a tragic story. Tanu Rabbanan, Maisa b'Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, sheyeroichiv ala chamor. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was riding his donkey, vayoytzim Yerushalayim, and he was headed out of Yerushalayim. This is clearly at the time of the Churban, where there was terrible tragedy and hunger. And his Talmidim were following him. They saw a young girl who was picking through the feces of the animals of the Arab bands over there. She was picking through the feces to try to find a couple of kernels of barley. That's how desperate she was. When she saw Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, she quickly covered her hair, and she stood in front of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. She told him, Rebbe, give me money, give me support. I'm dying over here. He told her, Biti mi'at, who are you? You know who I am? Bas Nachtiman ben Gurion. I am the daughter of one of the wealthiest people. Biti, Mama and Shabes Avicha, what happened to the fortunes that your father had? She told him, Rebbe, Loichadin, Masla Yerushalayim. Don't they say this motto? Isn't there a famous saying that people say in Yerushalayim? And that is, Melach Mamoin Keser. If you want to salt your money, meaning if you want to preserve your money, Keser, give it away. Give tzedakah. Giving tzedakah will preserve your money. V'amrila chesed, or doing chesed will preserve your money. And my father didn't give tzedakah, didn't do chesed with his money, and now he lost everything. So then Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, but you did a very wealthy shidduch. V'shal beis chamich heichanu. The money that your father-in-law put into the ksuba, he did chesed. Where's that money? Amr she told him, when you mix good and bad money, it all goes down the drain. The bad money ruined the good money. Amr Loy, she told him, Rebbe, Zachar Ata, do you not remember? Do you remember you were the Masada Kedushin by my Chasana and you signed the Ksuba? Do you remember? I don't know if he was Masada Kedushin, but do you remember that you signed the Ksuba? Amr Loy Talmida, if he turned to his Talmidim, Meberechim and Zakai, Zachar Ani, I remember it clearly. When I signed on the Ksuba, I read in the Ksuba that said, Elef alofim dinare zav be'savia. There was going to be a Powerball of money coming from her father's side, Hutz Michel Kamel, besides the mega millions that was coming from her in-law side. That's how much money there was there. And now she's desolate with nothing. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai started to cry and he said, Ashreichem Yisrael, fortunate are you, Klal Yisrael. When we're doing the Ratzon of the Rebbeinu Shalom, Ein kol umma v'loshen she'letos behen. No nation can possibly have any control over us. But Rachman l'Tlan, v'zman she'ein oitin v'tshayne shel umma shel makayim, moistron b'yad umma shvela. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us over into the hand of the lowest of nations, and Rashi says these Arabs are like Bedouins. They don't even have houses. They live in tents in the desert. The lowest of the low. We're not just being dependent on a low nation. And Hashem pushes us so far down to the bottom that we literally have to start picking amongst the feces of their behemoths of the lowest nation to find some barley. Frank the Gemara, are you saying that Nakdimin ben Gurion didn't give tzedakah? But Tanya, we learned, we learned about Nakdimin ben Gurion. When he walked to the Beis Medrash, it was like tiff. They rolled out the red carpet for him. Klei milas, silk carpets, they would roll out for him. They would roll out silk carpets for him, and then they didn't take them back. They were left for the poor people to take. They would fold it up behind him, and they would have it. So he was literally bleeding money to the poor people around him. So that's not called he's not doing chesed. So he didn't do it with him shemayim. He did it for his own honor. He didn't want to give those beautiful silk sheets away. He wanted to show that he's choshev. He only stepped on it once. Or he could have done a lot more. Based on his wealth, he should have done a lot more. Because just like people say, how much do you load up the camel? It all depends on how strong it is. If you have an F-350, you can tow a house with it. If you have an F-250, you can tow a shed. If you have an F-150, you can tow a case of soda. And if you have an F-150 electric, you can tow a case of paper towel. Tanya, Amr Abelazar Rab Tzaddik, Arab in Nechama, I should see the Nechama in Malay Re'isiyah, if I didn't see with my own eyes, this poor daughter of Nakdimin ben Gurion, Shahaitim Alaketes Sa'ayim, Bibain Talfei Susim, amongst the hooves of the horses, Ba'aku, in the city of Aku. Karasi Allah Mikrazeh, and I said about her this puzzle. Imloy Teidi Lach, Hayafa ben Hashem, if you aren't going to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're not going to do the mitzvahs, then Se'ilach Mikveh Atzayin, go behind the sheep, and behind the sheep is where you're going to pasture your animals. Don't say Gidiyasai, your animals, your own bodies you're going to have to nourish going behind the flocks of sheep of the Goyim and picking out the small barley. So it's very hard to end the Gemara on such a sad note. So I want to share with you a Marsha that Dudi Samuel shared with us when we finished today that doesn't work so well, but at least puts a nicer spin on it. And the Marsha asks, I don't understand. What was the Lashon that the Gemara says? I just want to turn back because I forgot the Lashon of Gemara. The Gemara says at the bottom, Ashreichem Yisrael, exactly what is the Ashreichem Yisrael that we fall to the bottom and we have to deal with the behemoths of the Goyim if we don't do Ratzon Hashem. On that, can you say Ashreichem Yisrael? So the Maharsha says, when the Kadosh Baruch Hu punishes Klal Yisrael, what he could have done is he could have slowly degraded their lifestyles until they're rock bottom, which would take such a long time and put us into such a long period of punishment. Rather, Hashem does things very quickly. He takes them down quickly. He brings them very quickly from the wealth that they had to the most desperate situation, so that they should do tshuva right away, and he can quickly pick them up. So Ashreichem Yisrael, even though the Baruch Hu has to punish us, he tries to set up the punishment where we should be able to get through it as quickly as possible and bounce back up. That's the good spin that the Maharsha puts on. I want to put a different spin to end the shir with tonight, and that is we should all be zoicha to the ksuba from the Rebbeinu Shalom, the same type of ksuba that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai signed on. Elef alpayim dinari zov mibeis aviyah, for all of us. So on the one hand, we should all win the Powerball, and the other side, we should win the Mega Millions. We should all have bracha and tzlacha and a shefa, a big shefa of only good things.
Amen.
Okay.